Diane had completely forgotten about the old box in the attic of the house, with her name scribbled on the side. When she finally opened it, memories from the past began to emerge. At the bottom of the box, she found an old tape recorder. Although she didn't exactly remember what she had recorded upon hearing the contents, Diane couldn't hold back her tears at the revelations that tape held. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Diane sighed deeply as she opened the door to her family's old house. The creaking of the rusty hinges echoed down the empty hallway, making her shudder. She hadn't set foot in that place for over 25 years, a place filled with sweet and bitter memories. The peeling walls and the smell of mold told the story of years of neglect. As she walked through the rooms, memories of her childhood and adolescence flooded her mind. There was the living room where she played with her sister, the bedroom they shared, the kitchen where her mother prepared breakfast, and the parents' bedroom, where her father had suddenly passed away when she was just 15. The pain of that loss was still palpable. Diane, her sister, and her mother couldn't bear to continue living there after the tragedy. They moved to their grandparents' city, leaving behind not only the house but also friends, school, and an entire life. Now, at 40 years old, Diane was back. The house had been rented out for years, but it had been vacant for a while. She came to arrange for the renovation and sale of the property. It was time to close that chapter definitively. As she inspected the kitchen, a pipe under the sink burst as soon as she turned on the faucet. Water gushed everywhere, drenching her clothes. Diane cursed, trying to contain the leak with her hands. She urgently needed to find tools. She remembered that her father kept a toolbox in the attic. She climbed the creaky stairs, feeling her way in the dark until she found the light switch. The bulb flickered a few times before illuminating the dusty room. Diane located the toolbox in a corner, but something else caught her attention. A cardboard box covered in cobwebs, with her name written on the side in her own childhood handwriting. Her heart raced as she recognized that box, forgotten for so many years. She hurried down, managed to improvise a repair on the pipe, and cleaned up the mess. Exhausted, she sat on the living room floor with the mysterious box on her lap. Opening it was like stepping back in time. There were her favourite dolls, letters from school friends, and yellowed photos. At the bottom, she found her old diary. The pages were slightly wrinkled, but her round teenage handwriting was still legible. Diane smiled as she reread her dreams written there. She wanted to be a doctor. Well, almost there. She had become a nurse. She dreamed of a big house. Ironically, now she had one, even if it was falling apart. She planned to have 3 children. Not exactly, but her 4 cats filled her life with joy. And finally, to marry Martin. Ah, Martin, her first love, her teenage passion, that pure and intense feeling that we experience only once in a lifetime. Diane closed her eyes, remembering the moments they had spent together. The bike rides, the afternoon studying in the library, the awkward first kiss. Everything ended abruptly with the death of her father and the sudden move. They didn't even have a proper chance to say goodbye. For years, she thought about him, imagining what it would have been like if they had stayed together. Diane remembered that at 22 years old she returned to her hometown, determined to look for Martin. She was full of expectations, dreaming of a romantic reunion. But upon arriving, she discovered that he was engaged. The disappointment was devastating. Since then, Martin became nothing more than a sweet memory of the past. Rummaging further through the box, Diane found a small recorder with a tape. There was a label attached with the words, "Only open on 05/15/2023. Curiously, it was exactly 25 years after the recording date. Diane vaguely remembered making that recording with Martin, but she couldn't recall the content. She tried to turn on the device, but the batteries were dead. Frustrated, she put the recorder aside. It was already late and she needed to find a place to sleep. She superficially cleaned her old room and improvised a bed with some old blankets she found. Lying in the dark, she couldn't stop thinking about Martin. What would his life be like now? Would he have children? Would he be happy? And if they had stayed together, what would it be like? She fell asleep with these questions in her head, dreaming of a past that could have been. The next morning, she was awakened by the sound of a truck parking in front of the house. It was the renovation team she had hired. Diane got up in a hurry, trying to fix her messy hair before answering the door. Her jaw dropped when she saw who was standing on the threshold, Martin, in the flesh, smiling at her. "Diane? Is that really you? I thought your family had already sold this house," he asked, as surprised as she was. For a few moments they stood there, absorbing the improbability of the encounter. Martin explained that he was the owner of the maintenance company. Diane mentioned that she was there to renovate the house for sale. They couldn't stop looking at each other, noticing the changes that time had brought. Martin was more robust, with some grey strands at his temples that gave him a charming air. Diane, on the other hand, had kept the same sparkling eyes from her teenage years, although some expression lines marked her face. In the days that followed, they worked together on the house renovation. They avoided talking about the past or their personal lives, but even in everyday conversations about paint and pipes, it was impossible not to feel that old spark reigniting. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Martin invited Diane to have a beer. She hesitated. "I don't know if I should. Your wife might not like it." Martin laughed. "What wife? I've never been married." Surprised, Diane accepted the invitation. At the local bar, between sips of cold beer, tongues loosened and confessions came to light. Martin recounted that a few years ago he had gone to the town where Diane lived, determined to look for her. But upon arriving, he found out she was about to get married. Discouraged, he went back home without even speaking to her. Diane's eyes widened. Indeed, she had almost gotten married years ago, but the engagement was broken off shortly before the ceremony. Then, it was her turn to confess that she had also looked for him in the past but found out he was engaged. "But I also didn't end up getting married," Martin added. The two burst into laughter, realizing how fate had played with them. So many comings and goings, so many almost encounters, and now here they were, single, in the same city, working together. "Seems like we never got the timing right, did we?" Diane commented, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Martin held her hand over the table. "But now, maybe it's the right moment." As the days passed, Diane and Martin began to get to know each other again, but in a different, deeper way. Conversations that once were only about the house renovation became more personal, revealing layers of their lives added by years and experiences. Diane noticed that Martin's smile still had the same effect as before, but now there was something more. A silent understanding of the pains and joys that time brings. As the renovation progressed, the bond between them also strengthened. It was common for them to work side by side in silence, exchanging knowing glances and discreet smiles. At night, when the day's work was done, they would sit on the porch talking for hours about the paths their lives had taken. Martin would talk about his travels and how he devoted himself to the company, while Diane spoke about her life in the big city, her work as a nurse, and the changes she had faced over the years. Now, as adults, the love blossoming between them was like a more mature version of that youthful feeling. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Diane eventually moved back to her hometown, deciding to live in her childhood home. The renovation took a new direction. Instead of preparing the house for sale, she turned it into her new home. Her relationship with Martin blossomed naturally, as if the 25 years of separation had never existed. It was as if they were teenagers again, rediscovering love, but now with the maturity and wisdom that only time can bring. As the months passed, this love matured, and what began as a renewed friendship quickly transformed into something deeper and more enduring. It didn't take long for Martin, on a quiet night under the stars, to propose to her. Diane, moved, accepted, feeling that they were finally where they were meant to be. Shortly thereafter, in a simple and intimate ceremony, surrounded by friends and family, they exchanged vows, uniting their lives once and for all. Now, the home that Diane rebuilt was not only a house full of memories, but also the beginning of a new chapter, where she and Martin would continue to write their story together. On a sunny Sunday, while they were tidying up the attic, Diane found the old tape recorder. Martin recognized it immediately, a nostalgic smile on his face. "Wow, I had completely forgotten about this," he said. "I guess it's been 25 years, right? It's time to listen to it." They put in new batteries and, holding hands, pressed play. The voices of their teenage selves filled the room. "Hi, us from the future!" Diane's young voice sounded excited. "When you listen to this tape, we'll already be old, 40 years old." "Surely we'll be married and happy," Martin's voice responded. "We'll be living in a big house with a huge garden," Diane continued, "and we'll be happy forever." The couple looked at each other, moved. Martin hugged Diane affectionately. "Look, we got our future right, didn't we?" he whispered. Diane nodded, tears of happiness in her eyes. There they were, in her childhood home, together, happy. The journey had been long and full of detours, but they had finally arrived where they were meant to be. That night, sitting on the porch and gazing at the starry sky, Diane reflected on her journey. All the pains, disappointments, and near encounters had led to that perfect moment. Maybe the lesson was this: what is meant to be, will be. Sometimes it doesn't happen according to our plans, but the universe has its own designs. The important thing is to keep the heart open to recognize happiness when it finally arrives. Martin kissed her forehead lovingly. "What are you thinking about?" Diane smiled, snuggling closer to him. "About how life is funny, and how grateful I am that we are here now." The couple stayed there, hugging, enjoying the peaceful night. The house that was once a stage for so much sadness was now overflowing with love and hope. And the future, once so uncertain, had never seemed so promising. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.